Between 1890 and 1910, heroin was sold as a non-addictive substance for morphine. It was also used to treat children suffering with strong coughs. Cocaine wine, anyone? Metcalfe's cocaine wine was one of the huge variety of wines with cocaine on the market in the old days. There was another wine, Mariani wine in 1875 was the most famous wine of its time. And this other wine here, the Pope even used to carry all the time, and he called it the Vatican Gold Medal. There was even a cocaine paperweight back then that promoted cocaine use. And what about this alcohol with opium in it and 40% alcohol in this over-the-counter medicine? And then we have in 1900s cocaine tablets on the market for all stage actors and teachers and preachers just to get them through the day. What about for children? Cocaine toothache drops. And that was in 1885, and that's what kids used to relieve for pain for toothaches. And what about opium for newborns? That's what we have here. And the opium also had 46% alcohol. What's next, everybody? We're gonna have cacao. Chocolate was once taught to be a fun food, and then they turned the bean into a chocolate bar, and then they turned the chocolate bar into something more dangerous, cacao nibs, and then it became an everyday product like cacao powder, and then we found out later it was just as bad. We're going to look at this week's video, and we're going to see some of the issues that come along with chocolate. And you know, what's funny to me is it's promoted as raw. They say raw chocolate. And some of the promoters have said, well, the real unhealthy part of it is when it's cooked. When it's cooked, it's bad, but when it's raw, it's okay. And for the last 5 or 6 years, people that have been selling it have been saying that. Well, we're going to see a video today by a fellow named Ben who finally exposed what's been really going on, that up until recently, there's never been a raw food chocolate on the market. There's never been a raw cacao on the market. Even the strongest promoters of raw cacao have admitted that what they were promoting wasn't truly raw. Alan and Janet used to live in Papua New Guinea.
That's right.
And on a cacao farm.
Yep.
Okay, why don't you tell them a little about that?
Okay. Well, I was just happened to be working there in Papua New Guinea, and we came across a friend who we worked for a year or two. So we were there when the local people harvested the cacao pods, and then they opened them up and fermented them. And when they did that, they have a big fire, so they actually ferment the pods and then dry them over a warm fire.
So how warm is the actual fire?
From memory, it got pretty hot. They had a whole bunch of coconut husks down in a big pit, which they fired up, and the cacao was on top of that. Definitely
hot enough to be considered cooked.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Now, would you say all people that ferment cacao do it that way, or?
I think so. This is going back 20 years, but I believe it would still be done the same.
But do you think it's possible that people can get raw chocolate?
Well, the beans are processed. They have to be processed. So I'm not sure what degree. You know.
Well, what do you mean processed?
Well, they have to be dried. Like they have the cocoa nib in its natural state is a sort of quite a sloppy sort of a seed. So it has to be fermented a little and then dried.
Hey all, this is Ben Ripple, organic farmer and founder of Big Tree Farms, a sustainable supply and farmer development company based in Bali, Indonesia. We're making a video today to sort of try to explain some of the issues surrounding raw cacao. Most of the raw cacao imported into the US and EU and Australia is not at all raw. Most of the products, especially the cocoa butter and the cocoa powder being brought in and sold as raw, is actually high heat processed. And we're going to talk very briefly about why we know that these products are high heat processed. We've done lots and lots of research with engineers from all over Europe, a couple engineers in the States, as well as people that own chocolate factories, all trying to figure out whether or not it was possible for industrial commercial presses to make cocoa butter and then cocoa powder, but make it raw. And every single one of them, without exception, came back and said that it is not possible for industrial machinery to process butter below like 200 degrees Fahrenheit. What we found when we brought this raw butter and raw powder out to the market was that most of the potential buyers for our products were like, this stuff doesn't taste like chocolate. Where's the rich chocolatey aroma and flavor? And our butter wasn't white enough. And we were like, but that's what raw cocoa butter and raw cocoa powder is. What we realized in that instant was that almost all of the product that was in the market was heavily processed. Cocoa powder doesn't have a chocolate flavor unless it's roasted. Cocoa beans, when you eat a raw cocoa bean, it doesn't have an inherently chocolate flavor. If we roast it and we grind it and we add sugar, we end up with something that tastes like chocolate. Cocoa beans, when they're raw, they're astringent, they're earthy, they're herby, like grassy notes, and that's what a really raw cocoa powder should taste like. It shouldn't taste like quick without the sugar. And yet, that's what all of these products that were in the market were tasting like. The raw butter that was on the market, or that was, quote, raw, that was being sold on the market, very different from our raw butter, and we couldn't understand how it was possible to filter a butter that perfectly, make a raw butter that beautifully white and flavor-free. The reality is that it wasn't raw at all, because industrial presses for butter use what's called a filter press, and at very, very, very high heats, they take the butter that's extracted from the bean and they force it through fine, fine mesh filters, and all of the sediment is extracted. What comes out of our presses is a little bit of paste, a little bit of cocoa bean, and an incredible amount of rich golden oil that's been extracted at like 40 to 42 degrees Celsius. This whole industry, we need a new form of transparency. If everybody out there is going to believe that Big Tree Farms has the truly raw cocoa butter and cocoa powder and is going to believe us and trust us, we just need to show it to you.
I appreciate the research that those people have done to get this processed chocolate off the market that's being deceptively taught as being healthy and raw. And so thank you very much to the people that have done that. I think you've done a great service to the raw food community. But what about the people that have been promoting this as a raw product all this time, and maybe they knew it wasn't raw or maybe not, but it's pretty common knowledge that you couldn't get raw chocolate up to that point. And they never came out and apologized. They never came out and said anything wrong. And they led a lot of people astray, because a lot of people are suffering from a lot of the effects of this medicinal herb. And we have to be careful of these things. We have to be careful of people that are teaching things that truly aren't healthy. And it just shows either their lack of knowledge or lack of integrity. Now again, if you're one of my friends, or if you're anyone out there selling raw chocolate or raw cacao, I am not against you. I appreciate you being part of the raw food movement and trying to help people. Maybe all of you, every single one of you, have in your heart's desire to help people get better, and you've been taught that raw chocolate is healthy and that's the way to do it. I have no personal issue with you for that. And I don't know what your motive might be. Maybe that's it, maybe it's something else. But I do know the facts about raw chocolate, everybody. It's not my opinion.
Let's be honest. The raw cacao, just like cooked cacao, still has within it a lot of compounds that are not really that healthy. Many stimulants that are belonging to the family of the methylxanthines. The xanthine family includes caffeine, theobromine, theophylline, which are used as drugs in medicine, and that are so stimulants that people can use them in rave parties instead of common street drugs and get the same results. That alone should tell us something. Those so-called healthy stimulants are accompanied by antioxidants. And just because something has antioxidants in it does not mean that it is healthy. Poison mushrooms also have antioxidants in them. That does not make them healthy. Antioxidants are in the plant to protect the plant, and they are in almost every food that is nature-made, especially plant food that is made in nature. So what are those stimulants doing to us? Besides accumulating in our brain and causing brain dysfunction and imbalance, they might make us feel good temporarily, but they are masking depression and other conditions that we might have, allowing them to in fact get worse as we become more and more addicted to these stimulants. In addition, they are affecting the liver. The liver has enzymes whose job it is to continuously clean up toxins and neutralize them before they can be thrown out of the body through the kidneys. And the liver has specific enzymes to break down caffeine and other xanthines and methylxanthines that are found in chocolate. So whenever we eat those things, we are adding a lot to the toxic burden of the liver and causing it to work too hard, which makes it harder for us to get rid of other toxins at the same time. Additionally, these substances are affecting our stomach and our digestive tract, and they definitely have a negative effect on our kidneys because of the diuretic effect. So we're losing nutrients like magnesium and other minerals that we have a need for because of the effect on the kidneys. So if we go into this in a 2-hour discussion, we could mention every physiological effect, but right now I will just say it is not physiologically healthy, it is allergenic, it is bad for the kidneys, for the liver, for the digestive tract, and for the brain.
I have no beneficial gain of exposing the truth about the abusiveness of this toxic drug to the world, and I'd actually benefit off selling it and promoting it, because I'm one of the only major raw food websites out there at rawlife.com that does not have raw chocolate in any of my products and will not promote it or sell it. And you know, financially, I'm sure I'm losing a lot of money by doing that, but that's not why I do what I do. And you know, it's something that is a very controversial issue, because the people that love it for a reason, because it's very addictive. Look, folks, you can say coffee, tobacco, marijuana, even cocaine. You know, if you're an addict of any of these things, you're going to be a big fan of these things, unless you've had some pretty hard crashes. And I won't say necessarily a fan, but you're going to desire it. And even if you know it's not good, you're still going to make excuses to do it. That comes along with the addictiveness of it. But when you find out it's bad, and you know it's bad, and you want to get off it and you can't, that's slavery. And there's so many people are slaves to this toxic drug or these toxic drugs. But you can go today to rehab for cocaine or rehab for alcohol. There's no chocolate anonymous out there. You can't go to a chocolate place and go there. Well, as we talk about these things and we see all these clips in this week's video, we're also going to give you an alternative of what you can do and how you can get better. But in this week's clips, we're going to have some clips by Jeremy Safran, who was one of the first people to bring the raw chocolate to the raw food world. And it was a big hit at first, but then Jeremy even realized that it was a pretty toxic drug, or it could be if it's abused, and he warned people not to do it on a regular basis. We're going to have an interview with Jeremy, who was interviewed by my friend John Kohler. And John Kohler has a video site called OK Raw, and John is another one that doesn't promote raw chocolate because he knows that it's not a health food. It's not a superfood. And I thought it was a great interview with Jeremy and John, because Jeremy says there's no nutritional benefit even at all to the seeds. It's all in the fruit. And it's a very interesting interview. And I've had other interviews with Jeremy, which you could find on YouTube, and we might have clips of those in this video. Then we're going to have a lady on the show who had a serious side effect to the raw chocolate, and she's going to talk a little about her experience. And we're going to have some more surprise guests. And the final surprise guest is one of the up-and-coming teachers in the raw food world today, who's been around a long time, and he has great information. And I really agree with his assumption of raw food chocolate and these herbs in general. So we're going to have that in today's video, in this featured video. And look, everybody, you make your own choice what you think is best or you think is worst about this chocolate issue and the chocolate. I might seem like I'm totally against it, if somebody decides to have a piece of chocolate on a certain occasion, I am not against that. I really am not. But if somebody goes around believing that raw food chocolate is a superfood and is healthier than it is more dangerous, and it's only good and doesn't have side effects, I am strongly against that. If you want to call it a snack and not snack often, go ahead and do that. I could think of much more harmful things than raw chocolate used as a snack. However, when it's abused every single day and used as a superfood or used as a special magic food, as it's so-called said, or used for its nutritional benefit, which is not what I recommend, because there's so many great fruits and vegetables out there that are healthy and don't have any negative effects, where you can get all the nutritional benefits that are found in the cacao bean. Well, then I'm strongly against it, and I just want you to decide for yourself. I'm not the chocolate Nazi that some people might say, that I just want to ban everyone that's selling chocolate or talk bad about everyone. I know people that use it, and we'll have my wife give an experience that she had, because it's not only a physical thing. It doesn't just affect us physically. It also affects us in our moods. And my wife is one of the most sweetest, actually not one of, she is the sweetest, most gentle, most beautiful girl in the world. And when she took raw chocolate, something changed. And she's going to talk about her experience.
Hi everyone, I'm Andrea. I'm Paul's wife, and he wanted me to come on here and talk about cacao and chocolate and raw chocolate and all of that. And I definitely in the past have been a chocolate lover. I love any types of chocolates, really. I would, grew up eating Snickers and Nestle Crunch bars, and then I got into the health food, and I started to eat maybe vegan chocolates. I would make sure there wasn't milk in there, and so I still liked the chocolate. And I got into the raw foods and discovered there's raw chocolate. And so I remember the first time I had raw chocolate, I had it in a shake. My friend made me a smoothie, and I definitely felt the effects of the chocolate after drinking it, and noticed that it was, I was a little jittery and excited, and I was like, wow, that's strong chocolate. And I think that the difference is maybe the raw is stronger than the cooked, and that's why it hadn't affected me so much. So I would eat a lot of the raw chocolate and used it and loved it, and then I went for a period without eating it, and then when I reintroduced it into my diet, I noticed that jolt again, and then maybe even I was irritable and just different side effects. Even Paul would notice it, and he kind of would joke around with me, did you have cacao today? And this is over a 10-year process. I would have it back and forth, and so when I was pregnant also, I stopped doing it, and I didn't want that caffeine. I was really sensitive to what my baby was getting from me, so my diet really cleaned up a lot when I became pregnant. And when I reintroduced it again, I felt a change, and I was like, maybe this isn't the best for me. So I really have cut down. I really don't have any at all anymore. Maybe I'll have a bite of something that has a little bit, but it's not an everyday occurrence at all. And I use it as a special treat if I would ever eat it, and I would prefer the cooked chocolate over the raw chocolate at this point. So that's kind of been my experience. And even breastfeeding, I don't want to have it because it's passed through the milk. So it's one of those things that I don't even need anymore. I don't even deal with it. I'm happier without it. There are definitely side effects to eating the chocolate, and Paul wouldn't even know that I had any. And once, I'd keep some in the cabinet and just take a square here and there, and I guess I would be a little more irritable maybe if I hadn't had it in a while or something, and he would joke with me, did you have cacao today? And I was like, I did, how can he tell? But so I think that that's another thing. I want to be a happy person. I don't want to take something that's going to stimulate me and make me irritable. As a mother of a toddler, I probably wouldn't give Noah any chocolate. I would definitely give her carob at any time. But I try to keep chocolate and those things away, the stimulants. And it does have, theobromine, which is similar to caffeine, and I don't want her, she doesn't need any more energy. She's fine with that. So I would be careful, around the kids and things like that with that. I mean, if they're used to it, you probably don't notice that they have any change, but if you were to stop giving it to them and then gave it to them again, I bet you would notice a difference. So yeah, it's something to consider. While pregnant, I would recommend avoiding cacao and just leaving it out of your diet, because it does affect you and the baby too. So I was very simple with my diet and tried not to have anything, herbal teas and caffeine and chocolate were definitely a few foods that I kept out of my diet while I was pregnant. I don't see any benefits to someone consuming any chocolate at all while pregnant. I mean, maybe a small piece if you're really craving it and you love it and you haven't, had it for a long time, but to have it on a regular basis, it could definitely, be harmful.
A lot of women crave chocolate during their monthly cycle because it's a mood enhancer.
Sure. I would try replacing the chocolate with an herbal tea. A lot of times people, think around, it's a hormonal thing. They want the chocolate satisfying some hormone need that they're needing. I would try to have different herbal teas you can experiment with, and add honey or milk. You can make it delicious and replace the chocolate with a tea that's a lot healthier. And a lot of times, us as women, we like to have some kind of comfort food, and making herbal teas is a great way to bring you that comfort, and you can experiment as well with that, adding different things.
There was a time where I went out, and for months, every time on the road, when I went out on the road, there were people that were suffering from some kind of effect from the chocolate, and they couldn't get off it. They were shaking, they were sweating, and it was already cold outside, but they were still sweating and shaking. The same symptoms somebody would have to some serious well-known drugs. These people had, and they couldn't get off it. They were just addicted to it, and it made me open my eyes. So I'm going to give you a little history of how I first learned about raw chocolate and why I take the stance I take, and then we'll get into some of these videos, everybody. So sit back and enjoy this week's video about raw chocolate, and let me know what you think when we're done. Just post your comments and videos below. Post your comments and questions below the video, and let me know what you have to say. And everyone, if you are addicted to chocolate, I'll give you some alternatives, but you need to get off it. If you're doing it every once in a while, maybe once a month as a snack, again, I don't see an issue with that if it's a small piece of a snack. I really don't see an issue with that. Even if it's cooked, I'm actually think. Even cooked chocolate, if it's a snack, is just as okay as raw chocolate. It doesn't matter if it's cooked or raw, if it's an occasional snack. And it also depends what else you're doing in your diet the other times. But again, everybody, it's not being promoted as that today. And I think it should come with a warning. It should come with a label, almost a skull and crossbones on it if it's used too much. And the warning is not there, so I'm trying to warn everyone about the issue if we abuse it. And I know a lot of people that say they don't abuse it or they don't feel bad from it. Well, first of all, if you don't feel bad from it, so what? That doesn't mean it's not bad for you. I know people that smoke crack and don't feel bad from it, but that doesn't make it okay. It's a fact. It's not an opinion, everybody, and it's just a matter of time before you will feel the effects of it. Try going without it for a couple of months and see if you're addicted to it, to see if you really need it. And, if it makes you feel great, well, there's a reason for it. Because of the adrenaline rush that you get from it, and it also lead to adrenal fatigue and other issues when you crash, when you have a burnout from it. But don't be deceived, people. I've known I've called it a poison in the past. I've known I've called it a toxic drug. Well, it can become a toxic drug if it's abused, but if it's taken as a snack, it's not a toxic drug. And is it poison? Well, if you overdose on Tylenol or other aspirins, does that become poison to the body?
A lot of times when Paul and I are on the road traveling, we meet many people who have experienced cacao and have some negative side effects. Even people who were shaking and saying, "I can't get off it, I'm addicted." And So it can be a powerful food, and you have to be careful with it. So a lot of people, it's kind of worrisome that they use it as a superfood and have it every day. And I think it can really cause adrenal burnout and just get your hormones out of balance. So I would, after seeing a lot of these people, I realized, maybe it's not so good for me. And, so just be careful with it. I think that that's the most important thing, is just realize exactly what it is and what it's good for, and research it. Research the effects of cacao and what the ingredients are, and then you'll understand better what it does inside of your body.
Hey guys, Dee here. I'm here in my backyard with my son, the lovely Mink. Mink, sit down. Anyway, I wanted to come to you guys and tell you guys about my experience overnight with raw chocolate, also known as cacao powder. I actually bought this from Whole Foods, which I love, and my kids were fiending for some chocolate, And so I went to the store 2 days ago and bought this cacao powder and made several little things for them. This is the Satan juice, or Satan powder. I'm not going to show the name of the company because I don't think it's fair to them, because there are many companies that make it. And mind you, this is just my experience with it. There's a lot of people that do well with this crack, but I don't do well with drugs. So this will not be in my diet. Some people market this as a superfood, but I'm only telling you from my experience. And my experience is this. Last night I made some chocolate pudding. It was yummy. Put fresh strawberries on top. Fresh raspberries on top. And it was gorgeous. It looked just like it. It was thicker. It was the best pudding I probably ever had in my life. And so after eating about half of it, which I only put about 4 tablespoons of it on my plate, I began to have severe heart arrhythmias, heart palpitations. And I could literally feel my chest just beating super fast. And I was like, wait a minute, is this stuff a stimulant? It didn't dawn on me. Cacao powder, chocolate, stimulant. Hello. Surely it's a superfood. Surely it couldn't hurt you, right? Wrong. And as the night went on, I felt like crap. I had to go lay down. And I haven't felt this bad since before I started my raw food diet. So I knew it wasn't my veggies. I knew it wasn't my diet, because for the last 2 months I have not ingested any sugar, because I was trying to do a sugar-free diet, and I've been on a raw food diet now for 8 days, and so it surely couldn't be, probably about 7 days. It surely couldn't be my diet. And I hadn't really changed anything different other than this cacao powder, okay? So on here, they say that it is chock full of polyphenols and antioxidants. I hate to even read it because it pisses me off. But anyway, so as the night progressed, my fibromyalgia kicked into overdrive, okay? My body started aching. I had a headache. My legs began to hurt. I started to swell. I had to urinate more frequently. I was like, oh my God, something is really wrong. If this doesn't stop, I'm going to go to the doctors. So that was about 7 o'clock last night. It is now almost 1 o'clock in the afternoon the next day, and I am still in my jammas, and I am still recovering from this stuff. So last night, while I'm feeling like crap, I started doing some research on this cacao powder. And a lot of people say it's a superfood, it's great for you, it doesn't do anything for them. Negatively, it gives them more energy, blah, blah, blah. And then there are big-time people in the raw food movement that say this is a drug, It is a stimulant. It is bad for you. It is not a superfood. It has been proven to harm your body, toxic, blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh my God, and I have just ingested a whole mega load of this stuff because I put it into the pudding. So I just wanted to come to you guys and tell you guys, say no to drugs, say no to cacao. Every time I say that, people go, cacao, and it's not. This is no joke. It is nothing to play with. If you are doing a raw food diet, some people say that it takes a year or so for you to start feeling the sensitivity effects of the raw food diet. Well, for me, because my body is already totally depleted from my fibromyalgia, I totally start feeling this stuff. So if you want to use it with your own discretion. I also bought some good alternatives for the cacao powder, which is, I never can say it right, but it's a carob, C-A-R-O-B. It's sweet. It's a little like bittersweet, but I mean, if you want that chocolate taste, you could go for that. But yeah, guys, this stuff is from Satan. Satan's powder. So anyway, this is Dee. Love you guys much. Remember, this is just my opinion amongst a lot of other people. But if you still want to ingest the stuff, just make sure that you do your research and that you are using safe amounts with it, okay? Talk to you later.
What is your thoughts about cacao powder?
Well, I mean, I don't use it myself, and I know plenty of people that do use it. It does contain caffeine and theobromine. Theobromine it's used in a lot of pharmaceuticals. I know it's very controversial. It's certainly not I don't classify it as being a superfood. As far as it being a poison, I don't know if anybody ever dying from it. I know plenty of people that use it, and it definitely can be addicting. I've seen a few people have trouble with it. One fellow that came to see me was using it extensively, and it took him about 2 weeks to get off it. He was shaking for about a week and a half. But I'm not really want to get into any of these controversies that exist in the raw food community, because to me, I don't think that's the important thing. I don't use it myself. I tried it once in my life. Somebody gave me some. I certainly didn't feel well from using it. But there are people out there that are using it. But people that come to see me and they want what I consider the best way to go, I tell them it's best to leave out.
Most of our friends in the raw food movement have realized, along with us, that the cacao is not a superfood or a health food that they want to be eating. And maybe in the past they did eat it, but now they realize they want to be as clean and have their food as natural as possible, and that cacao is a stimulant, so they don't use it on a regular basis.
I want to take a moment here and I want to explain where my history and my background came with raw chocolate. Because when I first started getting into the raw food diet many years ago, carob was the big rave. It wasn't chocolate. And now people are into the chocolate and using the chocolate and so on. Well, here's my experience. When I first learned about raw chocolate, I heard about raw chocolate, I was very excited because I love chocolate just like everyone else. But I'm always aware and I always do research, and my research wasn't good enough because I thought it was going to be a good food. Now, I never liked raw chocolate as a cacao bean by itself. I might have tried it once and I absolutely hated the taste and I wasn't impressed. But when I've tasted desserts that came from raw chocolate, I was very impressed. Actually, maybe a little too excited. Actually, very excited because I got the jitters. I was so excited. I just had so much energy and I was so hyper. And I'm normally a hyper person to begin with, but this was just out of the world hyper. It was crazy. But I didn't think much of it. But I had a friend who was one of the first people to create raw chocolate candies. And she would produce them and they tasted amazing. And I was blessed to be the official taster of her chocolate company. So I would taste these. I'd be one of the first persons to taste these different types of chocolates. And it was just amazing. I mean, I couldn't get over how great they tasted, and they were just wonderful. And as time went on, I started to read up and study and realize, and then I spoke to Jeremy Safran about this, and Jeremy was the person that exposed the chocolate issue to the chocolate to the raw food world, and then exposed also that it wasn't healthy years later. Well, when I heard those reports and I did the research along with how I felt myself, I realized it wasn't as good as people said it was. So I told my friend, I asked him, can you make a version of it with just carob? Now carob is a pod that is delicious. It's a delicious pod that comes off a tree and has a very sweet taste. As a matter of fact, in the old days, it was used almost like money because it was so valuable. And it's just a sweet, delicious flavor. Some people today have carob powder that they use. It's C-A-R-O-B. And carob is a food that's wonderful and has no known side effects other than, you know, it's a very sweet, delicious food. Maybe if you chew the pod, you can create some teeth issues because it's a hard pod, and too much of that might run to that issue. But there's no known health effects to it, side effects to it. So I convinced my friend to try to make a carob alternative to her chocolate treats. And she did that, and I'll be honest with you, they didn't taste exactly the same, but I'll also be honest with you and say I thought the carob ones tasted better. You see, if you add the sweeteners and the ingredients and the oils to anything, they're going to taste good. And yes, the flavor was a little different. And some of you out there, if anyone out there says, well, carob doesn't taste as good as chocolate, anyone out there, if you take a carob pod versus a cacao bean and you eat them by themselves, I will guarantee that that carob pod will taste better. As a matter of fact, my friend John on OK Raw did a video about that, and I want to play a piece of that so you can see here in a little while, so you can see the difference of that, because it's a great video and great information. But but when you mix it with all these sweeteners, that's becomes a different product. And you know, one of the people, because people are always looking for scientific studies about this, one of the people, Gabriel Cousins, said it himself. If you take a few beans, and he gives an exact number, he says it's not toxic and maybe can be helpful in a medicinal way. But if you mix those beans or take too many beans of cacao and you mix them with these sweeteners and these oils and everything else, then it becomes very toxic to the body. And we'll read that study here, but it's you know, so anyway, the carob was much better. I loved it, and so I was able to get off the cacao, and it was great, and I was blessed to have had the experience, but I wanted to bring the information out to the world. And to my sad surprise, when I started telling people the truth about cacao, people were getting down on me. Well, it was a little too late because they were already addicted. It's like going into what I do is like going into a crack house and telling people that crack is no good. And I'm not talking about crack addicts that know that, they're just addicted and can't get off. Let me correct it. It's like going into a group, going into a home where there are 5 crack addicts that just smoke crack for the first time and they're really excited about it and can't wait to the next hit, and nobody ever told them about the negative sides of crack, and they didn't feel the downside of it yet. And here I am going to tell them, well, that's not good, and they're going to say, yeah, right, I'm having some more crack. You know, go back there a couple months later, they're going to be down and out in the gutter, and they're going to say, I should have listened to you back then. Well, if you're not addicted to cacao yet, listen to me, everybody. And if you are, you know, my prayers are with you, but you can still get out of it, everybody. I want to have my wife on, and she's going to talk about her issue that she had with it, with the cacao. And then we're going to have some videos, and I'll introduce each video. And we'll talk a little about carob and how people can use that as a substitute, which I highly recommend. Alright, everybody, so that's one of the reasons why, to answer one of the common questions I have, is why don't I have any cacao at rawlife.com. And if you have any other questions or comments, post them below the video. And please, 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 I'm happy to answer questions about cacao, and I'm happy to answer questions about the medicinal effects and everything like that. But I'm not happy to, and I don't want to comment on people. There's so many different people out there selling cacao today, and I don't know their motivation for doing it, everybody. You have to ask them. You know, but I do know that it's not a healthy thing, and I hope after seeing this video you're convinced.
This is John Kohler with OKRaw.com. Today I'm with my good friend Jeremy Saffron, and you know, we have a special story to tell you today about this tree that we're looking at. Most people unfortunately never get to see this tree, although this is all the rage, according to some people, in raw foods. And what we're looking at right here is a cacao pod on the tree. And many people don't know this, but Jeremy actually was the one who introduced cacao into the whole raw foods, market. Let's first harvest one of these cacaos, man.
I love this.
And check it out. So you can see the cacaos lower on the tree, they're still green. These ones are really small, and then now this is a ripe one. Nice, really good, rich color. So here's the cacao we just harvested. So Jeremy, tell us about the cacao and, you know, when you learned about it and when you started to, you know, introduce it into the raw foods community.
Well, I had, seen them here in Hawaii, and people had them growing here all over the place, and nobody ate them, nobody knew what to do with it, and then someone had showed me about the fruit, eating the fruit off of it, and then I started getting interested more and more, saying, hey, people really want this, people are really excited about this, you know, it's a really up-and-coming thing that people were like talking about, oh, the one thing that they still ate, they were all raw, but they still ate chocolate. And I said, oh, well, why can't we do chocolate raw? I mean, everything else is easily done raw, why can't we do this? And so I started, finding the beans a little bit here, and then I was looking for a better source, a way to share them with people. And I had gone to the Natural Food Expo, and people were there, and they would have like their displays of like beans.
Right.
And I'd be
I
like,
remember that, man.
Give me the beans.
I saw you at that expo, actually.
Right. I was like, I don't want the chocolate that you made into something. I just want the raw bean. And I started getting into it and started turning people onto it, and even other raw foodists had come here to the islands, and they had heard about this, and so we started harvesting hundreds of these pods and sharing them with people. And the thing that's beneficial about it is what they call theobromine, which is the plant itself is Theobroma cacao. And the membrane that coats around each of the seeds is a concentrated form of theobromine. And so many people, think about the seed, that the seed has a lot of theobroma to it, but it barely has any at all. In fact, any that there is just the remnant mostly of what's left from what was the fruit that was coated to the outside of it. And I say to most people, I was like, why would you want to eat the apple seeds when you could eat the apple? Why would you eat the cherimoya seeds when you could eat the cherimoya? It's the same thing. If people can get their hands on the real cacao, they usually don't really have the need for the seed. A lot of people look to it because of the hormonal benefits. There's a huge amount of benefit from the theobroma to balancing and regulating the hormones, especially for women, and that's why they often seek it out during and around their moon time. But when you eat the fruit, you get what you really are looking for. When you're trying to get out of the seed, you're actually able to get right out of the fruit itself. It's a delicious fruit. It's very sweet. It's kind of like got a little bit of juice to it, and it's, you suck it right off of the seed and then spit out the seed. But those people that like to use the seed, they can be eaten straight when they're in their purple form, but we'll actually ferment them under banana leaves and then dry them, and that's how they turn into the cacao that people grind up and use for their in their diet and stuff. Mostly entertainment food is what it's looked at.
Entertainment food. So why do you call it an entertainment food, Jeremy?
Well, because it doesn't really have any major health benefits. I mean, minor health benefits, just like alcohol has minor health benefits, but anyone that's like drinking an extreme amount of alcohol is more likely to be hurting their liver, but having a great time doing it, but they're probably harming their body more than they're doing good for their body. And the same thing is often true about the cacao, that it's doing a lot of damage to the body, but at the same time it's very fun. It's a great party food. It gets people very excited. It's got a lot of endorphin rushes to it. People really enjoy it for the exhilarating effects of it. Stimulant similar to coffee. People that do coffee, doing cacao is kind of an upgrade for them. But people that live a really pure raw lifestyle, they might not like the cacao because it does have that stimulating effect, and it is highly addictive. People are these days even beginning to look to other things. A close relative of it called kapuasu, which is a type of cacao that doesn't have those problems, another member of the Theobroma family. But these are great. They're really fun and great to get into, and the fruit, of course, has no negative side effect, unlike the bean, which does have some effect on the liver and the kidneys and the adrenals in the long run, but in the short run it's a great thing to get into. So let's maybe open up
let's
pod.
open it up. So now Jeremy is opening the cacao with a machete, and they're really hard, and there you go. Inside, this is the fruit, the non-edible part. This thing is really rock hard, like think a winter squash hard right here, man. You could barely break that apart.
And this is the part that we're going to be sucking off of right here.
Oh, and look, this one's sprouting. So sprouted cacao. So basically we're just sucking off the white, like pithy type, part on there for the nutrients, right? And that has no negative effects.
No negative effects,
but
right.
just positive effects.
It's just fruit and water and a little bit of theobroma and a little bit of minerals and nutrients. But yeah,
I
very
see.
low level kind of a thing. As you can see, there's not a lot of it anyway.
Right. Yeah, there's not a lot. It's mostly all seeds. So Jeremy, you know, I know that you found out and educated the raw food community about cacao, but now you rarely eat cacao yourself, right? Is that
Rarely,
true?
yeah.
Now,
very true.
why is that, and what did you find?
I found, you know, that it was a really big mood swing creator, that it created a lot of mood swings for people, and that if they didn't consume it every single day, that they basically would go into these wild rides, myself included, from it, where it caused a lot of emotional upheaval. People were getting angry and kind of like getting very testy very easily from it. It seemed to be very similar to anyone that was going through a withdrawal symptom from caffeine. People that were used to drinking soda every day, drinking coffee every day, or eating chocolate every day. All of a sudden, when we took it away from them, those people got very aggro and very angry, and then as soon as you gave it to them, they became completely complacent and happy again. And I began to say, wow, this has really got a dark side effect. And then the people that began to do it long term began to see a lot of negative side effects. It was really affecting their liver in a big way, and really hard on the liver, and people had to do a lot of cleansing. And the people that are used to doing even liver gallbladder flushes, having no problem with it, after a few years of eating the cacao, started to have a lot of challenges doing those flushes, where it would bring a lot of detoxification reaction and bring up a lot of emotional stuff for them. So as people more and more got into wondering, hey, why is this? And people began to experiment, more and more people started to write me saying, listen, I've had this exact experience too with the cacao, where, you know, I eat it and people get into these emotional swings and people get addicted to it, where they eat it every day just to feel good. And then as soon as they stop eating it, all of a sudden the world's crashing down around them and they're angry and yelling, and the slightest little thing sets them off. And I was like, wow, this is pretty extreme. I mean, I understand it's fun in the moment, and that's why, again, I'm not like against cacao in any way, but I wouldn't suggest it as like a health food. I'm saying it's an entertainment food. You get high on it, you have fun, you enjoy your time, and then, you know, you have to understand that the next day you might be a little hungover. You might have to make the choice to not indulge yourself in it again and again every single day to perpetuate that, but might be say, oh, okay, that was a fun time last night, and today I maybe should take to myself because I might be a little edgy and, you know, don't want to get in any arguments. So, you know, that's really mostly what I was finding about it. But then, you know, as I began to do a lot more scientific research with people, I was seeing people that eventually had done it to the extreme, had eaten a lot of it, that they were all of a sudden losing a lot of energy, that their adrenals were really getting
burnt out,
completely burnt out from doing it for too long. So I began to avoid it more and more. I mean, I always found carob a better flavor, and when I really eat the things with cacao from like a clean palate and taste it, things that are made with it, it's not like it tastes any better, but it's that the second bite is better. And I had to say, well, why is the first bite? Because the first bite, anything I really love, when I eat the best mango, it's the first bite that matters. Yeah, it's the first bite in any fruit that you're just like, wow, that just like took me there, and I'll eat the rest of it and enjoy it. But that first bite connected me to it. But cacao is the opposite. I ate cacao and I was like, but then I'd eat a second bite, and then I'd want more, and then more, and then more. And I noticed, wow, you could consume just about as much as you had there. In fact, people eat the entire thing of cacao without ever thinking a thing of it. And that's because of its addictive principle. That's because the body all of a sudden, you know, is got this thing that's like stimulating it, and so people get very caught up about it, and they do it to too much of an extreme. And so I began to say, hey, listen, maybe this is something to be a little more cautious with than, you know, most of our regular food. They never had that experience from mangoes. And mangoes, interestingly enough, also are one of the few other foods that have the endorphin rush in your brain, just like the cacao creates.
Wow.
So for people that are coming down off of a cacao addiction, mangoes
Eat
are
mangoes.
excellent thing to get into, dried or fresh.
Wow. Eat mangoes, not cacao. So, so I would consider, you know, cacao, the nibs or the seeds, a recreational drug. Would you?
Exactly.
I mean, and it should be used as such. If you want, if you know, you need to stay up late one night to get your homework done.
That's
you know, cacao is probably a better thing than Jote Cola.
That's right, exactly. You're driving on the highway, you got to stay up late, going out to a party.
Yeah.
You know, this might be the good choice.
But I think you know, I think in raw foods now it's just being overused. I mean, it's almost in every recipe book, and some people say that you should eat it every day, and it's a superfood. And what do you think, man? Think it's a superfood?
I don't think so at all. No, I mean, in the sense of like as a stimulant, it's super stimulating. But I mean, I don't think that it's a health providing food. As far as most of the other superfoods that we talk about, whether it be, you know, spirulina or bee pollen or shilajit or things like that, those are very healing. They have great benefits to people's health. Whereas this doesn't really have much health benefit. There's a lot more detriment to it. But the entertainment value is high. But the health value is kind of low.
I see.
Not to say it doesn't have any. It has some health value, but the detriment outweighs any health value that it has.
Sure. So one of the health values that they often say is it's high in minerals and antioxidants. So what would you say about that?
Well, I mean, from my experience of it, it doesn't seem that nutrient dense at all compared to something like spirulina or sea vegetables or wheatgrass that are super, super high in nutrients. This doesn't even come close. And compared to something like blueberries or even strawberries, or goji berries, something that you can eat so many of that you eventually get this like a flushing, like a niacin flush in your cheeks and stuff. And you can tell there's so many antioxidants in it that it's actually, you can feel it working. No matter how many cacao beans you eat, you won't ever get that sensation. You might get like, wow, but you won't ever get like a cleansing reaction or a healing reaction from it. And that's one of the ways that we can tell. And people, promoting this as a health food, feeding it to children and telling people that have illnesses to eat this. And it's actually a known carcinogen, raw or cooked. It's known to cause cancer in animals. And so most of the research that's been done with so many things out there, people say, oh, this was tested on mice or tested on cats or on animals. A lot of things are tested on animals, and that's how they make their claim, oh, it's so healthy. But they can also say, hey, that's a claim as why it's unhealthy. And if we look at dogs and look at cats,
if we fed this, actually we should probably pick them up off the ground. There's dogs right here.
Right, exactly. We don't want to leave these around for the dogs to eat.
And what would happen if the dogs ate it?
The dogs usually die.
Yeah.
The dogs get very sick. Most animals, in fact, funny that you say we should pick them up, but the dog won't eat it. The dog knows better. The animals know not to eat this, that this isn't actually food. So one of the few foods that when you're walking through the jungle, you'll see the entire pile of them on the ground.
On the ground. Nobody's eating them.
No one's eating them.
Right.
There's one type of rat. It's a wood rat that likes the shell.
Oh, yeah.
And he won't eat the seed. But he does eat the shell and sometimes the fruit.
Wow.
But very rarely. And so again, if the animals aren't eating them,
why are we? So what would be a good alternative for somebody that's trying to get off cacao, or for somebody that, there's cacao in a recipe because it's in so many recipes? What should they use instead, in your opinion?
Well, carob is an excellent thing. I mean, carob is pre-sweetened in its own way. It's a leguminous bean, so that's fantastic. And it grows prevalently through most places. It's not just a tropical. It even grows in California very, very well. And it's got a lot of calcium. It's got a fair amount of protein to it. It's got a good nutrient source behind it. So people really like carob, and it has a similar flavor to cacao. And we mentioned a little bit about the capuaçu, which is a relative of the cacao that doesn't have the addictive principles or the stimulating principles to it, but there hasn't been enough research done with that either yet. Just kind of something that's coming out a little bit. Very few people have access to that at this point.
Jeremy, there's also been a controversy about, no cacao is really raw. So what's your take on that? I mean, here, this is raw. We could bite into this and...
Yeah, show them the inside. It's
purple. Man, check out that. That's like purple, man. Is the cacao you buy in the store, is that purple? And if it's not, then, they got to be doing something to it. What are they doing to it, Jeremy?
Well, most places, they do, in order to use it, you have to ferment it first, and then you have to dry it afterwards. And since they're doing both of those things, they end up getting it to kind of more of a brown color. But that dark black color that people are used to, that rich chocolate color that people are used to, is usually from some form of heat. Most of the processing is done with a winnowing machine that removes the kind of like a peanut. It's got like a skin. After we've eaten the fruit, there's actually a skin layer.
Like the little test of it.
And the skin layer gets removed in the winnowing machine, which often heats up the air. Some people say just to 100 degrees, but a lot of those machines seem to go up to 150 and aren't that regulated. So it's been questionable whether or not the cacao was raw, and a few members of the raw food community, when I had questioned this thing, how are you doing this, they swore up and down about what they were doing was raw, only 2 years later come out of the closet and say, well, that wasn't actually really raw. And the truth is, with all things, that unless you really
do it yourself,
you're not going to know.
I mean, we could take these and dehydrate them at low temperature, then they're truly raw cacao.
That's right. And they'll be purple, and they won't taste like that cacao that people are looking for. And
I mean, how these taste, what, more bitter? Or
much more bitter. Much more bitter.
So if your cacao doesn't taste bitter, it's probably not raw, right?
Probably not raw. Again, exactly. And so the old adage is always, believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. And that's really the case with this, is with anything. Is it really raw? Well, unless you saw it happen, and even then you gotta,
But even if it's raw, it doesn't mean it's healthy, right?
That's right. Even if it's raw.
It should be still a recreational drug.
That's right, exactly.
And used when you need it.
Lots of things are raw, and not
doesn't mean they're healthy.
Raw sewage is raw, and that's certainly not healthy. So, raw food is definitely about the relationship with the plant as much as it's about the fact that it's raw. It's knowing what plants are going to give us the benefits, what plants have the things that we ultimately need, and having a real connection with those and finding the best way to preserve the nutrient value of every food.
Absolutely.
So.
All right, well, that was a great interview. Thank you for your time, Jeremy.
You're welcome.
I appreciate sharing your expertise about cacao.
Alright everybody, I hope you're enjoying this video, and I know it seems like I might have been persuaded so far because I seem to be giving the negative facts about cacao, but that's because there are so many and I just want to warn people about the truth. Well, I wanted to have this video as balanced as possible, so I wanted to have somebody to interview who took a neutral standpoint on if cacao was toxic and should never be used, or if there are certain times when it would be okay to use. And I was thinking about what guests I can have, and I found just a perfect person. It's Daniel Vitalis, a raw food promoter and teacher, and he teaches all about herbs, and we're going to have him now talking about cacao, and he's going to give his opinion and his feedback. I think you're going to really enjoy what he has to say. So here's Daniel right now.
Hey, good to meet everybody out there at The Raw Life. My name is Daniel Vitalis. I've been involved in the raw food community for a long time now. Over a decade. I've been teaching in that community for a few years. The last few years, and by the way, when I say teaching, what I mean is I've been on the road teaching all over the United States, all throughout Canada, even over into Europe and South America, teaching about nutrition. The last couple of years, I've made a big transition out of the sort of some of the dogmas that have really infused the raw food community. I wouldn't call myself a raw foodist today, and I certainly wouldn't call myself a vegetarian today. Instead, what I really focus on is indigenous nutrition, and I like looking at the nutrition that's most natural to human beings. I got involved in the raw food community because I wanted to know what was the natural diet of my species.
There's one thing that's being promoted in the raw food world that I know it's not a healthy item, and I don't mind it being promoted as a snack, but when people say it's a superfood, I worry because the people that teach this message do have a big following, and I see a lot of people led astray because they come to me in their downfall, and it is about cacao and chocolate. And I always like to ask the leaders, you know, like I said, I don't need everyone to agree with me, but I want people to be healthy. And I think things can be used as a snack or a fun food, but when things are promoted as a food, like a superfood, and they're not really superfoods, there's a big deception out there. So what's your feedback or your opinion about cacao, and about why do you think so many people are against me for just telling them it's not a superfood?
All right, it's a delicate subject. I've got I'm sort of like to occupy some middle ground, but I do feel I have some insight around this, and I might say a couple controversial things here. And I believe, Paul, is it correct for me to assume that a large part of your audience today probably has some biblical background? So if that's true, I would like to share something from the Genesis, which from the biblical perspective tells us about the plants in our ecosystem. And it essentially says that all the plants that bear seeds are here for us to use in some way. In other words, they're all tools. In the creation story of Genesis, we don't see that after the fall a bunch of wicked plants were created, if you know what I mean. They were already here. These plants all exist. And they're here for us to use as tools. Again, it's that thing of what's the tool and what's the application for the tool. Again, if you only have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. If the only superfood you know about is cacao, then you're just going to eat that all the time and burn out your adrenals. However, there's a place for it. There's a lot of plants today that have gotten a really negative rap because of the way people abuse them. Tobacco comes to mind. To me, tobacco is a very sacred plant. I see a use for it. Coffee is another one. It's just been heavily abused. Cannabis is like this. And 100 other plants, the coca plant, the poppy, all these plants that we talk about as drugs, I really believe are here for us to use and to steward properly. However, they're not things that, if we abuse them, they cause our downfall. Cacao, I've used it before in the kind of excesses that a lot of people are promoting. I didn't find that beneficial to my body, but I did learn how to use it. So now I know that cacao is a drug. When I say a drug, I also mean it's a poison. When I say it's a poison, I also mean it's a medicine, because I believe the word poison, the word drug, and the word medicine are all synonyms. They all really mean the same thing. So it's all about how much you dose yourself with it. Cacao certainly has mild poisons in it, the alkaloids in it. And if you abuse them, you'll burn yourself out because they're stimulants. They're cardiac stimulants, and it does contain central nervous system stimulants, as well as MAO inhibitors, which are neurochemicals. Using it appropriately can give you the energy you need to get through certain times. Using it all the time will draw on deep energy reserves in your body, and eventually you have to pay for that. You can't just, because you can't always take stimulants and just constantly draw off the bank reserve, the bank account energy that you've stored up. Eventually you're going to run out. So I think a lot of people realize that. What I'd like to see happen with cacao is that it gets the respect it deserves as a plant. I mean, it's a living creature, it's an organism. Cacao is an entity that lives on the earth with us, and I think we could show a little more respect to it. One of the biggest problems of not, and again, this is not the indigenous people who abused it. The indigenous people used that plant. It's really the sort of the white man or the Western civilization that took that thing and exploited it. And what we're seeing in the raw food today is just where we currently are in history in our obsession with drugs and our inability to steward those drugs properly. So do I think cacao is a superfood? I think it's a super drug. I think that's okay as long as you know what you're doing with it. But, you know, to go around calling it a food, I don't know that that's really accurate in the sense that you can't really make it it's not, you know, it's not like something you sit down and have a meal of cacao every day. That doesn't make any sense at all.
And the thing that worries me is it's being promoted that way, and I see a lot of people run into issues in the long run with that. And, you know, from a biblical sense, there are plants created, and they're not all created for good, but they're all created for a reason. And they're not all necessarily to be ingested, but I look at cacao and coffee beans and things like this as medicinal herbs. And anytime somebody's dealing with medicinal herbs, if you're not careful with it, it's easy to overdose.
Well, I have the experience, you know, early on in my teaching, I created a program called Elixir Craft, and that was about learning how to steward herbs yourself and work with medicinal plants. Now, at that time, I was really overdosing myself on medicines, and, you know, I felt great, just like somebody feels great when they dose up on heavy stimulants. You feel good, but there is a crash point, and there's a time where you need to regenerate yourself, and you need to rest. And that's, unfortunately, for a lot of us, that's how we learn. So, you know, when you look at how society's functioning today, I often like to give this thought experiment to people. Imagine if you suddenly completely removed all sources of caffeine from New York City. How functional would New York City be the next day? I mean, essentially, the whole system would begin to shut down because it runs on that drug, on the drug of caffeine. One of the problem is not, to me, the problem is not that people use drugs. The problem is that society is asking of us things that are almost impossible to do without revving up the central nervous system considerably. And that's why people are allowed to have special breaks throughout the day to drink coffee. Because, you know, essentially the system understands that if they're not drugged up, they're not going to be able to perform at the speed required. So, unfortunately, this is not a food issue as much as it's a lifestyle issue. And I think ultimately we need to create a sanctum, a habitat around us that's safe enough that we don't need to function like that all the time. And if we do function like that, we need to know how to maintain our bodies so we don't burn out.
Yeah, there's a very powerful herb called black salve, which if used correctly can be very successful, but it's so potent that if it's used incorrectly, it can create tremendous issues. And I'm very skeptical to tell people about it. And if I do, I make sure they have the exact instructions they need with it. And
you burn a hole in your body.
Exactly.
You're talking about a combination of herbs, and to include bloodroot, which is caustic. Yeah, exactly. Great point. That's a powerful herb that we're given that technique by the natives of this continent, right? So the Native Americans here stewarded that intelligently and safely. The problem is, by the way, they used tobacco from all the way from South America all the way up into the tip of North America. It was used, and it was used very safely, and it was used in a slightly different way than it's used by Westerners. Once Westerners got a hold of it and exploited it, they created the situation we have with tobacco today. Tobacco in the past was a much more balanced herb and was really, really respected to the point that it was considered the most sacred herb on the continent. Today, it's destroying the lives of a lot of people. And again, it comes down to, it's not necessarily that the tool is bad, it's how do you apply the tool.
Yeah, and not that it affects the body in the same way, but at the level it affects the body, would you consider coffee, tobacco, and cacao, along with these other type of herbs? Even, you know, at one time, cocaine was used as a legal drug to some people's benefit. But would you consider them all in the same class?
Okay, great. That's such a great question, Paul, because I was just recently in Peru, and in Peru they chew coca leaf, and coca leaf is the source of cocaine, but of course it's not, it's nowhere near the potency level. The potency of coca chewed is about equal to coffee, which is about equal to cacao, which is about equal to betel nut, which is chewed in Asia, which is equal to cat, which is chewed in Asia. And what we actually see is that all around, which is about equal to tobacco, what I see is that in all of the agricultural societies around the world, and if you do your herbal research on this, you'll see this is true, all those agricultural societies have a stimulant that they use throughout the workday to get through the workday. So if we went high into the Andes of South America, you see this. The people who are working the fields on the side of the mountains are chewing coca all day. In the United States, they're drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes all day. Over in the Middle East, they're chewing cat all day or betel nut all day. In India, these are all, I'd say they're all on par with each other. They're all stimulants to the central nervous system, respiratory system, or cardiac system, and they're all of about the same potency. They all have a significant habituating and mildly addictive effect, for sure. Again, I don't see that as a negative thing. I got to say that all of those plants have been wonderful in my life and have been great additions. However, they are, on a spiritual level, I would say those plants are greedy and they're habituating, and they can create a very dark relationship with you if you allow it. So again, they have to be stewarded and known how to use properly. Again, no one taught us this stuff, right, Paul? We grew up in a culture that fed us drugs just as powerful as cacao. We grew up I was fed corn syrup, an incredibly addictive stimulant. I lived on it. It got me through my school days before I was old enough to be given other stimulants. So we all grew up on drugs in this culture. We were never taught what the place of those is. The difference is in indigenous culture, we see that they have a very well-structured place for those kind of substances, so they don't get abused so much.
Yeah, one more question about this topic, then I want to move on to something else, but I think it's irresponsible for, not the average person on the street, but for health teachers to be misguiding people and not teaching them on a level that you're talking about now, giving them some kind of disclaimer with these drugs where people can use them to their benefit, as to just freely saying, take all you want. That's the same thing that the people that promote smoking and alcohol do, and people expect different when they go to a health person.
Sure, and I guess part of the challenge is the way that our business structure works, because once we're financially involved with something, we're very motivated to sell that thing. So, I've been very careful. I have a company called Surthrival. It's at surthrival.com, and we have some fantastic products, and I worked very diligently to make sure that the products that I carry are safe, that they're tonic, and tonic means the difference between a tonic herb and a medicinal herb is that a medicinal herb will be poisonous if you exploit it, and a tonic herb can be used every day. It doesn't draw on your energy reserves or poison you. So I've been very careful and very diligent about that for the reasons that you're mentioning. However, I think when somebody goes to a health speaker, they need to look at that person's goals and that person's life, because when you look at all the different health speakers in our community, each one has a very different, we all have a different goal and a different bend on how we bring the information. And if you're not aligned with that, some of the people out promoting cacao is very fundamental to their lifestyle. If you're globetrotting around the world, living a very extreme, high-speed, fast-paced, and intense lifestyle, you could imagine stimulants like that would be the only way to really do that. If you're living in a more rural setting, it's different. So it depends what you're doing. And I think people should look at the health speaker they're hearing from without assuming that person's an expert, and just say, hey, this is another person. Does this person represent something that I'm aligned with? The problem is people tend to idolize public speakers so much that they lose their discernment about whether or not they even want what that person's got to share.
And a lot of times I see the public speakers finding out later that it's not necessarily the healthiest thing for them, but because they've created a following, it's hard for them to just say, well, you know what, I was wrong, like we did when we spoke when we started this off. And You have anything to say about that? Because you're kind of in a position now where you're teaching people a lot, and if you find out you told somebody it was not the truth,
yeah,
how do you approach this?
How do I approach it? Well, what I've learned is to be very careful about making extreme statements, because you tend to regret them in retrospect. So that's just come with maturity. I've learned that it's better for me to tell people about what's working for me today than about what works. The only time I feel really confident to tell somebody something is for sure true is when there's immense history behind the thing and we know what the thing does. Unfortunately, with some of these issues, yeah, people don't have, I guess their egos get too strong. I think we all need to be able to admit when we were wrong about something, and I think we need to set up our business structures and our communication styles in such a way that we give ourselves an out for change, and we need to educate the people that we're talking to celebrate the changes that we make, so that if I am talking to my audience and I make a change and say, hey, you know what, now I'm doing this, I want the kind of audience that's adaptable enough to say, wow, that's great, new information, cool, we're going to make that adjustment too, or we're going to at least critically look at that adjustment. The problem is people set up rules. Here's where the raw food thing went wrong. It was based on a set of rules. There's a great philosopher out of China who said, when you lean on one concept too long, it will eventually collapse under you. And I think that's really true. So when we're like, here's my rules, I never eat this, and I never do that, you're kind of setting yourself up. In fact, when you have nevers or when you have rules, what it means is you're actually obsessed with the thing. So people who are obsessed with being 100% raw are actually obsessed with cooked food. I mean, people who are obsessed with veganism, really, they're obsessed over animal food. I mean, because all they do is spend all their energy saying how they'll never do the thing. It's like, it's interesting how part and parcel the thing that you are rejecting and your mission are connected. So to me, today, I'm in a place of like, Cacao, I don't care either way. I know when it's right for me. I know when it's not right for me. And personally, I'm not responsible for what anyone chooses to eat. All I do is motivate people and guide people with the best of what I have, and that's always changing because I'm always adapting.
Well, Jeremy Safran, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a great brother. He's one of the people that kind of told the raw food community about cacao when it first became popular. And recently he did an interview and he said that most of the nutritional parts is actually in the actual pith that comes around the actual fruit, not in the bean itself.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and bottom line, the cacao is not, it's not raw. I hope people get that. Like, how can you possibly get that cacao powder? How could that possibly be raw? The fact that people believe that these things are raw shows the lack of diligence in their own research. And it's funny to me because what happened to the raw food community? You remember, Paul, when we started this, there wasn't raw food restaurants everywhere. There wasn't health food stores that carried raw foods. The raw food diet, when I started it, looked like celery and carrots. I mean, there wasn't any of this stuff around. What happened to the raw food community is they're now at a place where they eat candy all day long.
Exactly.
That's hilarious. It's become the opposite. This is what happens when we get too rigid. We actually become the thing we reject. So the raw food community, in its quest for health, has become a bunch of like candy addicts. I mean, that's just, it's amusing. The agave thing turned out to be a big scam. The cacao thing turns out to be very drug-oriented. Again, I'm not against the drugs. I just think that it needs to be admitted what they are. These things are not raw. And so I want to say this. If I said to you, hey, that's raw sewage, you wouldn't assume that you probably wouldn't think that I meant that was sewage that had never been above 105 degrees. What raw sewage means is it's not processed yet, right? It's still raw. It has not gone through its cleansing processing yet. We haven't processed the sewage. Raw cacao is an industry term. The industry means it hasn't been processed into chocolate yet. They don't mean it's under 105 degrees. What they mean is it's unprocessed. What's happened? People took the industry term that means something else and tried to adapt it and convince themselves that it meant it had never been above 105 degrees. come on. Most of this cacao is over 300 degrees. Just, logic it through, or get online, look at the industry standards, look how they process things, look at the flow charts, and you'll see. So a lot of the food's called raw today. I mean, agave nectar, come on, like that. I personally have worked with agave plants. I've made fiber out of agave plants. I've cut down a lot of agave plants. And you don't go and just cut open an agave plant and agave juice nectar just comes out of it. Agave nectar is very, very similar to high fructose corn syrup. In fact, it's high fructose agave syrup. It's made the same way. Again, what happened is we just bought into a whole bunch of illusion and ultimately become the opposite of what we started out to try to do.
Exactly. And one of the things I find funny is I had a raw food restaurant, and when I was out teaching back in the day, everyone used carob as the chocolate flavor. And the funny thing is, though, if you take straight up carob pods versus straight up cacao beans, it's not even close how amazingly great the carob pods taste versus the beans. And then when you mix all the sweeteners with it, the agave and everything else, they both taste amazing because you're adding like high fructose corn syrup to it. But the taste, the flavor isn't much better, but one or the other. If you mix these amazing things, one of my jokes is, how do you make raw desserts? You add agave nectar to anything, it's going to taste amazing.
Yeah, you could add it to mud and it would taste good. Yeah, that's pretty funny. Cacao is bitter. Again, people need to understand a little bit more about nutrition because we've grown up in such a white bread generation. People are not very aware of what flavors actually represent. Bitterness is almost always in food. It's almost always an indicator that there's a medicinal compound present. Most often that's going to be a nitrogenous compound called an alkaloid. And those alkaloids have the flavor. Alkaline tastes bitter. Its opposite, acid, tastes sour. When you taste sour, you know there's an acid present. When you taste bitter, know that there's an alkaloid present, and that means there's a medicinal compound. And the bitterness is your mouth's intelligent design indicating to you that there's a poison present and that would stop you from being able to eat too much. Now, if we add a lot of sugar to it, suddenly we can consume more, and so we can actually bioaccumulate more of that compound, but even then there's a limit. Carob is not a medicinal food, carob's a food. And when you eat a carob pod, it tastes rather sweet, actually, as you probably know. It's got those seeds in it, but once you peel around that, it's very sweet tasting, and there's not really any hint of bitterness. Cacao is a very different food in that, like I said, it's more of a medicinal drug, and so you taste the bitterness, which is the presence of the alkaloid, whereas carob doesn't really have anything like that. So they're so different. I mean, it's funny how they've been associated, but you're right. Anytime something is poisonous, we tend to want to add something sweet to it. Tricks our palate. It allows us to consume more. Again, I think there's a place for that. It's just important that we understand what we're doing.
All right, everybody, there it was. That was Daniel Vitalis with some great information, and I think it balanced out the approach of not only this video, but the whole idea. So it's just not a whole bunch of people against cacao. I think we all have, to some degree, the same feeling that Daniel has about it, and we all expressed it in a different way, that cacao, if abused, is very toxic, but if you don't abuse it, it might have some good to it. But most people are abusing it, and that's why they end up with such terrible results. And if you're eating a raw food diet to begin with, you're probably healthy and you don't need it. But people are just using it and abusing it and creating all these issues. Now, I know some people that are completely against it under any circumstance. And then I know some people that are always for it under any circumstance. And that's one of the reasons I made the video. Now, let's talk about what you can do if you're addicted to cacao, or if you just love the flavor of chocolate. What you can do to kind of get away from it. Well, we spoke about it a little with Daniel, and on this video, it's a carob, C-A-R-O-B. Carob is a wonderful substitute, not even a substitute, it's just a better food that has a fudge flavor to it. And we are going to have Andrea talk a little about making recipes with carob right now, and then we're going to have John come back and he's going to compare carob to cacao, and we're going to see some more information that we need to see. So here's Andrea right now.
A lot of people make recipes using cacao and raw chocolate, and carob is such an awesome alternative that it's delicious. I love it. We buy from California when it's in season. The carob pods, Noah was teething on them. They were delicious, and you know, I would much rather have that fresh over any type of dessert anyway. But you know, carob, you can put it in desserts. I make some raw crust and we'll add it if I want a chocolate flavor. People don't even notice the difference half the time. And you know, you can put it in your almond milk and make a chocolate milk chocolate. But carob is a great alternative to chocolate any day.
Comparing, for example, carob to cacao, you know, carob has vitamin A and B. What you could eat basically has 1/3 the calories, so it has much less calories than cacao. Cacao is very high in fat. It can be up to 78% fat or 80% fat, whereas, you know, the carob is very, very low. I mean, maybe 1% fat if that. So 80% fat, 1% fat. You know, what's better? We don't want to be eating that much fat in our diets. I mean, these, you could basically think of these cacao as like nuts, because I mean, they're not the whole food. I'm eating the whole thing except for the seeds when I'm eating the carob, but on the cacao, this is literally just the seed or the nut of the cacao pod. Carob also contains protein, 3 to 4% protein, and there's no stimulants, no theobromine in carob. And you know, with cacao, they have things like theobromine and other things that maybe aren't so healthy for us. You know, theobromine, if you looked up in the dictionary, it's listed as a poisonous powder. So, you know, I don't think we want to be putting that in our bodies. The other thing is that if you feed cacao to a dog, you know, and you feed, you know, not even that much, it could lose its life because it's toxic to a dog. Now, dogs, on the other hand, they could eat carob. You know, other animals eat carob. So, you know, animals don't really eat the cacao beans, the seeds. If you go to like, you know, in the tropics where the cacao grows, you know, I don't even see the monkeys eating the seeds. They may eat the fruit and the pith of the cacao, but they won't eat the seeds. They'll actually spit them out because they taste bitter and they taste bad. So if these taste bitter and these taste bad, these taste actually sweet. These have a higher natural occurring sugar content. They're naturally sweet, whereas these are naturally bitter. And the other thing is that carob is alkalinizing. So this will alkalinize your system, you know, make you more alkaline, and we want to be more alkaline. And guess what cacao will do? It'll make you more acid. So, you know, this is carob's free of stimulants. And actually, you know, carob is the next up-and-coming superfood, in my opinion. It contains calcium, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, iron, and also, you know what? It's full of antioxidants and polyphenols. It's also really rich in fiber. So cacao has virtually no fiber. It's all fat. And this is really rich in fiber, and we all know most Americans are not eating enough fiber. So we want to get enough fiber. Also, you know, so want to recommend everybody to eat fresh carob and not cacao. And if you
All right, everybody, so there you have it. There's all our information presented on cacao. That's why, now you know why I call it Cacao, everybody. Again, if you have any comments or questions, post them below the video. And I pray that the information here will help you. This information is only for people's benefit. It's not pointing a finger at anyone. It is pointing a finger at the industry and the truth and the lies and the conspiracies. But no individual, I'm out to get nobody. I'm just trying to help people. So if you're going to use the cacao, I think you should listen to the great advice by Daniel Vitalis and use it in a way where it's going to benefit you as a medicinal herb, and understand that it's not a super fun food that people call it today. And if you've had any negative experiences with cacao, your story can help a lot of people that are either addicted to it or thinking of taking it. So if you want to post your comment and explain your negative situation that you've had, that'd be much appreciated, because I think it will help a lot of people realize that this isn't overall the best food in the world as people call it. And, you know, I know there's a lot of people out there, again, that think different and think it's a super wonderful food, and you might want to give some scientific facts to back it up, and you might feel the need to do so, but please don't waste our time, everybody. I think it was presented clear enough here that it's not the overall best food in the world for our bodies for every situation. Again, I didn't say it's a never food. I'm not saying, you know, you can't use it and get benefits from it. I'm saying the way it's being used today is not beneficial to our overall health. And I appreciate everyone out there who's been brave enough to speak about the negative effects of cacao and go against the popularity today in this raw food movement. And to those of you out there that, you know, want to learn more about this, you can go to the videos on my website at the Raw Life Health Show, and you can see more videos on this, or just go to the internet and type toxic cacao and you can see more information about that. And if anyone has any questions or comments, again, post them below the video. Hello everybody, I want to thank you for checking out my channel. If you'd like to subscribe to my YouTube page, you can just click here and that'll take you to my YouTube channel and you can subscribe there. If you'd like to check out my website, the Raw Life Health Show, where I have even more videos for you to check out, just click right here and you can be taken to the website, the Raw Life Health Show, and you can start your free membership right now. Until then, everybody, have a great day and a great raw life.